Moving on to the budget, there's not a whole lot to talk to about on policy issues, because the bulk of the policy issues, if there's any question, any controversy at all, it starts in the House, goes over to the Senate, dies in committee, or it starts in the Senate, gets voted out, comes over to the House, dies in committee, on any kind of major policy issues at this point in time. The budget's going to be, you know, I have mixed feelings. I mean, all at once, this thing could fall together, and we could be out of session on our due date on April 29th, and it could be a train wreck. It's going to be one extreme or the other, I'm afraid. It's either going to be a train wreck or everything's going to fall into place. Right now, on the House side, all of the budget bills, they're split up between the House and the Senate. The Senate starts about half of the budget bills. The House starts about half of the budget bills. The budget bills that we're running out of the House of Representatives, we are adhering strictly to the 99% law. In fact, we went down to 98%. This is the Revenue Estimating Conference projected the revenue for fiscal year 2012, which starts on July 1. And by law, we cannot budget any more than 99% of that revenue figure. The House chose to start at 98% with our budget target. So we have been struggling as House Budget Chairman to meet those targets. I'm very fortunate. The budget chair or committee that I chair is Justice, which we handle the court system, we handle the correction system, public safety. Those are the major ones, Department of Corrections. And our leadership has seen those as core jobs that state government has to do. And I have not had the struggle to meet my budget targets as some of the other target areas or the other budget areas have. But we're still, my particular budget happens to be one that starts in the Senate, and we're about $6.5 million apart on a $660 million budget. So there's going to be some interesting give and take when we get down to whether that goes to conference committee or if we have discussions. I will pass that budget out of the House on Monday afternoon, I believe, is the schedule where we're at now. And we'll send it back over to the Senate, and, you know, whether in discussions with the Senate, we come to an agreement that they can agree to and vote on and send it back to us, or if that'll go to conference committee. I'm sure there's going to be several budgets that will go to conference committee. Our big sticking point is we are adhering to the 99% law. The Senate, in their budget process, there's an anticipated $300 million that will end up and will be in the ending fund balance. And the Senate is counting on being able to spend a lot of that money. Well, that's not part of our income. That's not, it does and it doesn't fit under the 99% law. And so we're sticking to that 99% of the projected 2012 revenue. The Senate wants to delve into that $300 million. What we intend, the House intends to do with that $300 million is put into what we call a taxpayer relief fund. And then next year, when the legislature comes back, if that $300 million is actually there, you know, these are all projections that we're working on. If the $300 million is actually there, then the Ways and Means Committee will determine where that money goes. Leadership will be in that process, and we're intending on that goes back to the taxpayer in some way, shape, or form. And basically the theory behind that is that last year's legislature said that they were going to operate the state on, I don't know, approximately $6.1 million, something. I don't remember the figure. I'm so deep into the 12 budget figures now, I've forgotten the 11 ones. But the legislature said we will operate the state on $6.1 million. And we will set the taxes up to bring in close to that figure. Well, the economy's improved a little bit. We may bring in $300 million more than we anticipated. We look at that as that's still the taxpayers' money. Some other folks look at that as the state's money, and that's where the rub comes. So it's going to be an interesting 3 weeks till the end of the session. I don't know. I don't think the wheels will fall off like they have in Washington, but I'm sure there's going to be some contentious times and heated tempers before the final sine die of the 2011 legislative session. So
I think an interesting note is that the Governor Branstad campaigned on a 2-year budget.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the rare things that the House and the Senate have agreed on is the transportation budget for 2012. Now, the House actually passed a 2012 and 2013 transportation budget. The Senate stripped off 13 and has agreed with the House that will go down to the governor for his signature, or as I suspect, maybe his veto. And that is just considered a little test, I guess, if you will, of whether the governor really intends to require a 2-year budget, whatever that means, before he will sign any appropriations or budget bills. So,
why did the Senate choose to strip that?
Senate at this point has no interest in a 2-year budget.
Oh, really?
None. The majority party of the Senate.
Okay.
Okay. And they won't even talk about that. So they do anything that comes over with a 2-year budget, the second year will be stripped off.
Playing nicely again.
Well, you have to understand that the current policy is to do a 1-year budget. And the governor wants to change that.
Didn't we used to do a 2-year budget though back?
Long time ago, Jim.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Was it in the 70s? We actually had biennial sessions.
Biennial.
The legislature only met every other year until early 70s.
It's a great idea.
Texas still does it.
Yeah.
Texas legislature only meets for 140 days every other year.
Money and time.
Well, one of the considerations is it applies to voters. It isn't just an in-house fight. It's how much power or control or balance or checks and balances, however you want to describe it, you want the legislature to give up and give to the executive branch. Now, you might like that if you happen to like the current governor, but governors will ebb and flow. And so one of the discussions about a 2-year budget that's of concern to both the House and Senate members is you don't want to succeed the authority of the legislature and give it to the executive branch. And that's what you do as you shift and give the executive branch more and more power, which would be a 2nd-year budget.
And from the House's standpoint, we have told the governor, we have sent a bill, and I'm not sure of the status in the Senate, the transfer authority. Did the Senate pass it out or not?
Not yet.
They have not. We have told the governor point blank that this transfer authority bill would limit the ability of the governor to move money at will between departments or between budgets when the legislature is not in session. The governor has been informed by the House of Representatives we will not send him a 2-year budget until the transfer authority bill has been signed. So, you know, it was an agreed to thing. We sent the transpo budget over to the Senate. They stripped 13 off of it. We agreed to send it down to the governor to see if he's actually going to veto. And you know, what was a quote in the paper the other day when somebody asked him, "Would you sign a 1-year budget or a budget without the 2nd year on it?" And he said, "I will veto it. I will veto it. I will veto it." So he's made his stand very clear. But at the same time, he will sign the transfer authority bill before we send him any 2-year budget.
And what does he say about that?
Those conversations I'm not privy to. That's above my pay grade at this point in time.
Yeah. I find it, not at Jerry's expense, but I find it a little humorous about the transfer. they sent the bill that passed said that only, the most you can transfer for a single transaction was $6 million.
It's been so long ago since we ran that out, I've forgotten.
And the total transfer that could take for all of those was $18 million. Now, there is an amendment in the Senate to actually reduce that down to, I think, $3 million and $15 million. But the interesting thing, and I found the amusing thing, is the first thing that we get from the House was the Indigent Defense, which authorized the transfer for a one-time event of $18 million, which is 6 times the amount that they're gonna authorize. So I just found that a little contradictory, and so I don't know where this thing will go, because you can't on the one hand say we're only going to give you the right to transfer $18 million for the entire year and $6 million for one transaction, and then say, well, we don't want to do a supplemental, but we'll give you transfer authority for $18 million for a one-time transaction. So it's already we're working our way